Hello, everyone. My name is Kurt Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. Today, we're honored to have two incredible guests, Brian Blum and Evan Kaplan from Gecko Hospitality, an esteemed partner of Escoffier. Both Brian and Evan are powerhouse recruiters in the hospitality industry, helping connect top-tier talent with cutting-edge opportunities. Brian brings over 20 years of leadership experience in restaurant operations and professional staffing. As a franchisee and recruiter for Gecko Hospitality, he has an impressive track record of placing exceptional talent in the restaurant sector. From his time as a director at Applebee's, where he drove annual sales to 19 million, to his leadership roles at Ragazzi's and Houlihan's, Brian holds a deep understanding of what it takes and makes a business thrive. Beyond his professional success, he's a dedicated community leader, serving with the Rotary Club and spearheading initiatives like Memory Cafe to support Alzheimer's patients and their caregivers. Evan Kaplan is an award-winning hospitality recruiter with a lifelong passion for the industry. A sommelier and former food and beverage professional, Evan has spent several years specializing in executive search and talent acquisition for hotels, resorts, private clubs, and more. Recognized as a three-time Partner of the Year and Brand Ambassador Award winner, Evan thrives on building meaningful relationships and making the perfect match between candidates and organizations. His extensive industry knowledge, relentless drive, and passion for hospitality have made him one of the most successful recruiters in the field. So get ready for an insightful conversation about hospitality careers, leadership, and the future of talent acquisition in this ever-evolving industry. And there they are. Good morning. How are you, gentlemen?
We're doing great. Thank you.
Quite an introduction there, huh? My goodness, my goodness. It's very, very rare that I get the opportunity to interview two powerful guests on the show. So I'm super, super thrilled to have both of you here. I believe you're both, I think, Brian, you're calling in from DC, and Evan, you're right down the road in the frigid tundra that we call Colorado.
The cold state of Colorado. The unique thing is that both of us cover the same markets. We both cover New England.
Oh, you do?
And
How's
upstate
that?
New York.
Oh, interesting, interesting. Just to get us going, Evan, what is going on with this weather? I mean, we're never happy, right? My family has a business in the mountains, so they're loving the
Of
snow,
course.
right? We have a
Yeah.
hotel up there, and but I was over on the Western Slope last week, and it was like, stop and go, stop and go. And they closed I-70. They closed 70 again yesterday.
Yeah.
You'd think
Uh,
that we'd done this a couple of times, right? And they would be.
you would think usually down in the Denver metro, things get a little more sensitive for people. They describe what snowflakes look like. Western slope is just another day. But it has been pretty chilly out here for sure.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Brian, what's happening in the DC area?
Well, weather-wise, it's been frigid as well. So this morning I was walking my dog and it was in the teens. Wind gusts yesterday were up to 40 miles an hour. So it's been pretty cold. It's supposed to start snowing tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's everything's changing, right?
It is.
Everything's changing. Since we're focused on you right now, and I love your background. So we'll dive into all of the things we're going to talk about today, but I'm going to embarrass you a little bit or celebrate you a little bit. You got to give me, I see a ribbon right over your right shoulder. I see the Boston Marathon on the one side, and I think is that a velodrome over there on the right?
Yeah,
Or,
so that's
eh,
a cycling
yeah.
event. So I'm a cycler. I ran the Boston Marathon. I've run a few marathons. So up there I don't keep all my ribbons, just certain ones that mean something to me. So
Yeah,
got my
yeah.
Boston Marathon medal, my Marine Corps Marathon medal. My son's in the Marines as a captain in the Marine Corps. Um, Over my shoulder is a pink ribbon. That's the Cherry Blossom Half Marathon that I did last spring with my niece. Um,
That's great.
I'm not
That's
sure
great.
what other ones I have up there. I think my very first marathon was the Walt Disney World Marathon, so I have that one up there.
It's a good one.
That's a good medal.
That's
Um,
awesome. Can I just tell you? I always have to tell this story. Years ago, I ran the Peachtree Road Race. It was just a 10K in Atlanta,
yeah.
but it was like 115 degrees by 6:30
Oh,
a.m. And there I go. I thought I was in pretty good shape, and off
yeah.
I ran, and then this guy runs by me with a full tray of Krispy Kreme donuts, literally in full costume. I'm already out of breath, and this guy's like passing donuts out to the crowd. But congratulations. Brian, I was just going to let me segue really quickly. We talked about it briefly in the intro, and then we'll pop over to Evan. I'm curious of how you got into the industry, and was it through the casual dining segment? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on where the casual dining segment was and where it's going. Either of you actually, but we talked briefly about Applebee's, so I'd love to hear more.
So the last restaurant company I worked for was an Applebee's franchise group, and I ran 7 restaurants as an area director. Before that, I was a training general manager and general manager. Um, a lot of people think, oh, I want to be that multi-unit manager. I want to move my career up, and eventually get to the point where you don't love it anymore. And I think I didn't love being an area director. I was working at least 100 hours a week. It was like
Yeah.
being an owner essentially. You're working 7 days a week. You don't see your family, and it was just time to make a change. And um, one of our recruiters, Joan Boscawen, who's the only franchisee I think who's been with Gecko longer than I have, um, she called me up. I talked to her a lot. She would supply me with talent, but I would also talk to her. And she mentioned that Robert was going to start this franchising model for the staffing industry. And I interviewed a lot of managers at the time. So I thought, well, it might be a natural progression and I get to see my family more. So that's sort of how I got into recruiting, was through Joan and going up to, at the time, Chicago to visit with Robert, and
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and became a franchisee.
But you have to, one of the things that I always try to point out when we're talking to thought leaders on the show is that you get to a certain place in your life. It's just like running a marathon, right? You don't just decide, hey, maybe I'll run the Boston next year,
Right,
right?
right,
There's a lot of work, and you
right.
mentioned the hours. What's the quick advice to someone? Because we get a lot of questions, both from our online students who are a little older, and even from our ground students or residential students who are a little younger. Many like the idea of like this empire below them, right? I'm going to
Sure.
learn how to cook and all that, but I'm going to do the management stuff because I'd like to do a little bit more. But what do you say from an advice perspective to someone when you already know what you've been through?
So I think you have to determine early on what's your passion. So, to the
Hmm.
culinary students, I would say, are you really passionate about, food and being creative and being able to, create your own menu items and share those with your guests? And that's what gives you the thrill.
Hmm.
Or are you looking to make as much money as you possibly can? Are you looking to be a manager? Are you looking to be a leader? Um, and I think you kind of go in a direction that suits your passion. So I actually started in the kitchen. I was in the kitchen for, I think, 7 or 8 years before I ever went out front.
All right.
And I worked in a number of restaurants. Um, and I learned from some great chefs and great managers um, on really how the business operates.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was curious, so I learned how to write prep lists, and I learned how to do scheduling, and I think that's how I ended up getting more into the corporate side of restaurants. So even as a chef, I did go to school. I went to the University of Massachusetts, but after that, I was a chef for a group down in North Carolina, and but I always ask questions and I
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah.
And I think Gordon, I love to, if you've read the biography of Gordon Ramsay, one of the things he talks about is it's great to be curious and to learn and make lots of mistakes. And I encourage you to make only make the same mistake once.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like
No, it's great
learn, right?
advice.
Like a chef, an executive chef wants to teach, but he doesn't want to keep teaching you over and over again the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's like anything. It's like a baseball coach or a, football coach. Same thing. Curiosity is a great word. I'm glad you brought that up. And by the way, in full transparency, it's okay to be motivated by making a lot of money. I mean, that's
sure.
a very honest feeling, right? By the way, I went to the University of Oregon, but I partied at UMass.
Oh,
Just
did you?
FYI. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Talking about curiosity, I want to pop over to Evan real quick because I learned before we started the show that um, that he did a really cool event with Bobby Stuckey. It's amazing after several years and many, many episodes of The Ultimate Dish that, it's like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Somehow, some way, it all kind of comes together. Evan lives down the road in Denver, a real nice area of Denver. Like I said, it's super cold today. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your sommelier experience and then, how you got into that, where that passion was fueled. Uh,
Sure.
Talk a little bit about your experience with Bobby, who's a great friend of the school. I'm looking out at the Frosca Learning Lab. One of our classrooms is actually named after one of his flagship restaurants. But yeah, tell us more, Evan.
Sure, absolutely. One of the last operational positions I had was a director of food and beverage at Cherry Hills Country Club, just south of Denver. For most paying attention at home, it's like a private club on steroids. It is probably one of the most difficult positions I've ever had, but also one of the most rewarding positions I've ever had, not only from a guest service standpoint, but from a food perspective, from a spirits, from wine, you name it. It was at the top of everything. And it was something that gave me a platform for me to explore my passion for wine and spirits. And I was able to, through being a director of food and beverage there, I started as a restaurant GM and found my way working my way up. Was able to sit for my introductory somm and then certified somm. And I had the opportunity to get my introductory sommelier at a Southern Wine and Spirits warehouse just south of Denver. And Bobby Stuckey was there. And I'm forgetting the names of the other ones, but 5 master somms happened to
Wow.
be in town while
Wow.
we were there. One of the guys was from Aspen. And it was one of the more unbelievable experiences I've ever had, getting myself introduced that way, watching Bobby line up 60 glasses of wine and taking a sniff and sip of each one and naming every single one. I think it took him 10 minutes. It was one of the cooler things I've ever
Wow.
done. Being able
Wow.
to blind test and taste now on my own feels good. But unfortunately, fortunately, I've been recruiting for 8 years. So I don't, my chops are not as good and strong as they used to be.
But better than 98% of the population.
Probably better than most, but something that I definitely hold near and dear to my heart is was watching those Psalms up there and having them teach us and talk about it. It certainly inspired me to continue to pursue my wine education and to really embrace that with the membership that we had at Cherry Hills Country Club. It was a really
Yeah.
special group. I think we had a cellar well over 1 million. It was a pretty impressive list and was popping about 60 corks a night. So it was a lot of fun. It was a good time at Cherry
And,
Hill
and
Country Club. But much like Brian, 100-hour a week, you gotta love it. And I loved it. And I loved it so much I, almost became my own worst enemy because you just worked a ton. And was really dedicated to making that, a special part of that membership's lives, so to speak. It was great.
and it's a tremendous addition to your resume, right? So
Yeah.
anyone that's close to Denver or even in the West, understands how the importance of Cherry Hills. Ironically enough, our the current director of culinary there is a gentleman by the name of Ruben Garcia. He was most recently at Augusta in Georgia,
Yep.
and his wife works for us. She's our director of curriculum and content development. So, the world continues to get a little bit smaller. But when's the last time you were there?
At the club?
Yeah, because they just went through big remodel. I
They
mean,
went through a $24 million renovation, which I remember this is 8 years ago. They were talking about doing it then.
yeah, yeah,
I haven't gone back since. You do have
it's
to have a
gorgeous.
membership to get in there, but I haven't been there. I was there for 2 years and played golf twice. So I was working so
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's how it goes. Most food and beverage professionals who work in private club have never seen the course. And that was the case with me. But nonetheless, I mean, walking through that place was, you know, 3 US Open titles, a Phil Mickelson title, Andy North title. It's walking through the Hall of Champions in that club can give you goosebumps, even if you don't like golf.
yeah, yeah.
Special place.
I'm getting goosebumps. I love it. You bring up such an important point. I was a chef at a country club years and years ago in Oregon, and it was the largest private club in Oregon at the time. And to your point, I never played the course.
Of course.
I bragged about the course to everyone, but
Yeah.
I'd never been on it. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Just couldn't find the time, right? To
Yeah.
carve 4 hours out of your day or your
Right.
week. Yeah.
Never squeeze it in.
But great story. Before we dive into the current landscape of the hospitality industry as we know it with both of you, I want to set the stage just a little bit for those listening. Escoffier, as you know, has been a leader in culinary education for quite some time, all the way back to Auguste Escoffier over 100 years ago. And now with Gecko Hospitality on board as one of our partners, we're really sort of enhancing the way we connect with students or connect our students to real world opportunities. And again, we're super fortunate to have two experts like Brian and Evan on the show. So as leaders at Gecko, could you both share a little bit more about what this partnership means for both the Escoffier students and Gecko hospitality clients? Perhaps build the bridge for us a little bit. Evan, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I can take it. I mean, with the Escoffier students, I think the first thing that comes to mind is access. It's just access. It's made opportunities more accessible to a greater number of candidates who might not know some of the arenas that we play in. Brian, as you know, Gecko Hospitality has two divisions within our organization. There's a restaurant specific division and then a hospitality division. You've got two partners on who cover both sides of the coin. Brian is specializing in restaurants, corporate dining, higher education, things like that. I'm specializing in hotels, resorts, private clubs. Almost the redheaded stepchild is junior level candidates not knowing about the opportunities that lie in a private club. I feel like I've had that phone call quite a bit. So being able to open the avenue to the student body that there are a greater number of opportunities available. And then on the flip side of that, the clients that we're working with, listen, there's no secret that there's a massive shortage of junior level candidates in the culinary world. And having access to that talent pool within Escoffier from Gecko Hospitality standpoint is a game changer for us. Having the ability to connect a chef de cuisine or a chef de partie or a junior sous that we might not know had we not had Escoffier's the access to those students. So I think it's a win-win for everyone, but it certainly opens things up for Escoffier student body.
I love that, and it's appreciated, and it's really good information for our current students and our grads to know. I'll sort of volley over to Brian here, but wanted to just prep Brian's feedback on. We talked about Rob a little bit earlier, the founder of Gecko, right? He mentioned in a press release not too long ago, and I quote, "By pooling expertise, we're able to expand the scope of our operations and continue to provide personalized services to connect quality candidates with the businesses who need them." Keyword need. Brian, from your perspective or Gecko's perspective, for our students and soon to be grads, could you share a little bit more about how the recruitment process works? What do our students and grads need to be thinking about? Sure. And is it different than traditional recruitment models that people are used to? And then maybe both of you could talk a little bit about some cool, unique opportunities that graduates can have access to?
So I think the first thing is to think of us as sort of your life partners on the career side of your life, right? So you're going to have a partner in hopefully marriage or in life that on the personal side, but we're here through your entire career to help you grow your career and see the opportunities. So I would encourage Escoffier students and graduates to get us your resume with your contact information, and then make a point to always keep it up to date. Keep your emails up to date. Don't go changing your cell phone and your email every year just because you're getting a lot of spam.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
hone in
Good
on
advice.
keeping that up to, keeping it stable, up to date. And then we let you know of opportunities as they arise. And Evan and I, we work separate sides of the business, but we do share candidates. We each have recruiters who work for us, and they all share information and candidates with each other. So we're aware of a lot more opportunities than maybe just our side of the business.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I just want to, before we move away from that topic, I want to insert, I even have students come into the office a lot and they ask about, you mentioned resume, they ask about the relevance and importance of I like a good resume, right? And if a candidate walks in and hands me a cover letter, I'm like, I'm whistling Dixie, right? Is it still relevant, with all the stuff out there in LinkedIn and TikTok and pages? And any thoughts there?
Oh, I think a resume is extremely important.
Okay. Okay.
Think of it as a business card. It's an introduction. This is who I am. This is my career. As far as LinkedIn goes, make sure you have a vibrant LinkedIn page. Anytime you cook something, take a picture of it, pop it on your LinkedIn page, make a post, explain, hey, this is the dish. This is who I made it for. Hey, I was catering a party of 400 today, and here's some of the food we presented, and put them all up there, right? Let the world know what you're doing.
That's good feedback. You know that we're going to play this in front of thousands of students. So just so you know, No, but it echoes what we are trying to help. We start working on resumes with our students day one. I mean, we get them thinking about it right away.
And then as far as, recent grads, Evan mentioned that we recruit in New England. So we have a lot of seasonal clients, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, Cape Cod, the coasts of Maine, the seacoast of New Hampshire, the mountains of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, right? So they're looking for people that can come in and work for a few months. And the interview processes are starting now at the executive chef and sous chef level, but also sushi chefs. If you just want to get in a kitchen and learn to cook, right, and cook in volume, those seasonal restaurants do really high volume, and you can learn. You can work somewhere during the day and somewhere in the evening, and sometimes they'll provide housing, and you can just learn and soak up what there is to learn in those high volume kitchens. And then at the end of the season, you have the experience to go in to maybe a nice restaurant in a city somewhere and say, hey, here's what I did this summer. Now I'm looking for the next step in my career. Or you reach out to Evan or I and, hey, what do you have now that I can parlay this experience into something else? I do have clients that are always looking for junior sous chefs.
Sure. That's great feedback. Really wise. I'd like to kind of shift over to today's job market and opportunities and career growth. And so we'll start by looking at the market for chefs. The job market for recent culinary school grads is competitive, but it's also bright, right? According to the National Restaurant Association, the restaurant industry is the second largest employer in the country, and the industry workforce is projected to grow by 200,000 jobs. That puts us at almost 16 million places of employment by the end of this year. I think I'll throw it over to you, Evan. What trends are you seeing, is Gecko seeing, that are shaping these opportunities for, for young cooks that want to become chefs? And are there certain roles or sectors that are seeing a lot more growth than other areas, for example?
I would, that's probably a twofold answer, and you can steer me in the right direction if I veer too far off course. But what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling is probably the same thing that Brian is seeing, is that in the hotel, resort, private club side, the memberships in private clubs and the guests in hotels want to experience what they are having happen to them outside the four walls of the hotel or the club. So bringing in the outside influence of those public restaurants that are getting served for private clubs. And then the flip side of that, it's escaping me where the fact and the statistic came out, but I think 80% of the revenue that's going to be coming out of a hotel resort, a lot of that is going to be driven from food and beverage. The majority of that RevPAR that comes out of a hotel is not only going to be coming out of rooms. It's going to be coming out of food and beverage. So gone are the days of REITs and hotel management companies that are just looking to get revenue from there. And hotel food and beverage departments aren't in the red anymore. They're not getting operated that way. So it is becoming a revenue driver. So what does that mean for students? Don't pick the wrong one, because there's plenty of choices and plenty of avenues that you can go. If you're going to find some hotel group to work for and they say, okay, well, there's a mandate on 110 hours a week. No, there isn't. And that's also at the forefront of what's taking place. And a big trend is empathy and quality of life. And, you hear it, I'm protecting my mental health. Mental health, working 110 hours a week is not good for your mental health. And I think the companies that are putting that at the forefront are attracting the talent that wants to be there. Yeah, that organization might have to hire more people to support that revenue and that budget, but it's working because the tenure is starting to be there, and we are experiencing less people wanting to leave because they have someone who takes care of the most important things: physical, financial, and mental well-being. And the clients that we work with that do that, they don't really need us anymore. And that's good for them. And it's good for the industry as a whole. Obviously not good for the business, but it's good as a whole. And it's nice to see, because I think the three of us on this call probably come from a school that did not have that during that time. Maybe we're gluttons for punishment, or we just really loved what we did. But that's really what we're seeing, is that is at the forefront right now, in the hiring trends.
Brian,
Just to
this is great.
piggyback on
Yeah.
what Evan's talking about. So in the restaurant world, the largest restaurant company in the world, as far as full service restaurants goes, is Darden, right? So they own Olive Garden and Longhorn. They own Ruth Chris Steakhouse. They own Capitol Grill, Seasons 52, and others. They are a great company to work for, in terms of quality of life. And then also in terms of financially, their executive chefs, their general managers make over $150,000 a year, unless they're not doing their job correctly. So when you're ready to be a sous chef or an assistant restaurant manager and then grow your career, and you want to work for that corporate restaurant company with great benefits, they're a great company to work for. On the restaurant side, where I'm seeing a tremendous amount of growth is in the small local restaurant groups that own 5 to 10 restaurants, one owner or a group of partners, and each restaurant's a different concept. But they're keeping it local within a certain area. And then they're almost owning a market, I guess you could say. Because a lot of people, they want to go out to eat. People do go out to eat often. Even when the economy is bad, people are going out, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And they may get something a little less expensive on the menu, but they want to go out. They want service.
Yeah.
So being able to go out and then have, for one company to be able to have the same customers go to all their restaurants, but have slightly different menus, slightly different experiences, allows them to sort of, I hate to say own the customer, but own the customer experience.
Yeah. Can I, this is a whole separate episode. I started getting goosebumps when Evan started talking about, you know, what's important to people entering our industry. Yeah, you're right. The three of us, what was important to us a long time ago, even when I first started instructing students, right? It was it was storytelling, but was storytelling of how hard we worked and how little recognition we got. And it was almost this crazy badge of honor. And oh, on top of that, I did a lot of competitions and all of that, which defines us all, right? Evan studied really, really hard for the Psalm. It today, young people don't necessarily need those stories, right? They want to be heard. We do something what we call flipping the classroom. So rather than lecturing at our students, we give them some information to take a look at for themselves. And then when we come together again as a class, we ask questions, or they ask questions of our instructors, and we talk about it. So I just wanted to point out how thoughtful the responses are. This is a beautiful industry from our perspective, right? We've all come a different path. I'm a fourth generation cook, my dad likes to say. My dad's a master pastry chef by German standards, right? So I just have this crazy respect and admiration for those who who create beautiful customer service experiences, as you said, Brian. One thing before I go on, I want to ask Evan another question, but how do you guys feel about asking someone who's looking for a job where they see themselves? Like, where do you see yourself? And in other words, what job's best for me versus what job am I best for? Does that make sense? It's kind of turning the table a little bit, or either of you can take a shot at that one.
I think I asked that question infrequently.
Hmm.
I think most of the recruiters on my team and myself, when we get to a point of asking personal questions, I think we do get to the point where we say, okay, what's the short game? What's the mid game? What's your long game? Where do you want to be? Where does it want to
Hmm.
go? And I think that question, the responses you get are going to vary based off the candidate's age group. And I think it's going to be based off of where they see themselves and where they're going to go. I do think it's an important question to ask. It's one that we still incorporate. We might not put it out there as direct as you did, but we almost let that elevate to the surface and asking basic questions and saying, okay, I mean, we ask this question all the time. I'll flip it to you. What makes you unique? And the responses we get are unbelievable.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
give me boring corporate robotic answers, and then some people give responses of creativeness and thoughtfulness and really just opening up. And the ones that open up, you can typically see, okay, this is where they want to go. This is where they want to be. But I think where the candidates that we talk to, and depending on of where they are, we talk to people who are right out of culinary school under 21, and we talk to candidates who are in the twilight of their careers and 61 and still want to chef it and get after it. And we love talking to those candidates as well. So that answer is going to vary. Um, and we try to gently guide them to the right place as well. I mean, not only are we recruiters, you can see you've got some thoughtful tenured ones as well that will help guide the candidates. And I think that's important to do, is just to be honest about it and really put that honesty at the forefront of all the conversations we have.
What makes you unique? I absolutely love that. I'm going to incorporate that into my parenting. I might even ask my wife tonight, what makes you unique, and I'll get an answer for sure. From a recruiter's perspective, how do you think how do you think the demand for traditional restaurant roles compares to some of the newer, more specialized? We have students say, I want to be a food stylist, or, I'm really interested in culinary media, or, we have a food entrepreneurship program, right? I want to open up my own place. That's why I'm here.
Right.
So how do you compare that to the traditional path the three of
Oh,
us came up
I'll
through?
take that one.
Okay.
So I
It's
would
chopping
say
at
in
the bit.
terms, so there's a little thing that's out there in the world called AI. You may have heard of it.
Yeah, yeah,
And when
once or
I think
twice.
of a food stylist, I think of a job that's not going to exist in about 3 years because AI, that's something AI can do, right?
Okay.
AI is not going to be able to, cook a steak, but AI can put together a picture of a steak created from 1,000 other pictures of a steak, right? I mean, I just don't think that profession is going to be around. I think in terms of entrepreneurship, um, so I would highly recommend entrepreneurship, even if it's a side gig. Um, get involved with I think they call them like a food incubator, where
Hmm.
you can sort of rent space in a kitchen once a week, once a month. You can go in and maybe you make the best chili in the world, and you're gonna jar your chili, you make it, jar it, and you're gonna sell it to little local markets who are
Yeah,
then gonna
yeah.
sell it to the end customer, or preserves, or I know a woman who makes Rice Krispie treats and then sells them at little places on the counter. Little bakeries will sell them, and it's a side gig, it's a side hustle, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can just be something you're passionate about and you think you can make money at. Um, and sometimes those lead into other opportunities like owning your own food truck. Um, and then from a food truck, I see food truck owners then going into owning their own restaurants. And they kind of build that way. But
So with that said, Brian, and I love that response. And it's what students want to hear. That's why they're attracted to entrepreneurship, right? The possibilities, the imagination. What's the best advice for a recent grad or anyone that wants to come into this industry about positioning themselves to take advantage of those sort of opportunities? Probably giving Gecko a call, right?
yeah,
I mean, I certainly think Brian and I could gear and drive someone in the direction that they would want to go, but nothing's going to be given to you.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
still think that's real and echoes and is a very resounding truth in our space. If you want to be an executive chef and you can't run a P&L, you're not going to be an executive chef. Um, I mean, you might be if you have a really great owner or a great GM at a hotel, resort, or private club, or even restaurant. But if you're going to run a business, you've got to understand the financials. I've been on another Escoffier call when we talked about the triple threat of the chef of you've got to have the culinary chops, the leadership chops, and the financials. And if you don't have all three, there's always going to be one that is going to be a weakness, and there can't be a weakness in that foundation as a chef. Um, and listen, there's going to be some professional culinarians that don't want to run a P&L, and that's okay too. It just
Mm.
has to be, I think you have to be real with yourself on what you can do and what you want to do. And as a young culinarian coming out of a culinary school, if you just want to cook and be in the culinary world to start, that's fine too. But if you want to get to that next level, I think you've got to really put forth, okay, how am I going to learn leader? How am I going to figure it out? Do I need to take leadership classes? Should I ask my exec sous chef if I can follow him and stage with him for a few weeks? I think there's a way to go out there and get it. So
Yep. And I'm glad you said that. I was going to go down this path. I was on that call, by the way, Evan, and
yeah,
it's really, really important when we talk about leadership roles. There's demand for employees at the executive chef level, the sous chef level, like we've talked about in restaurants, hotels, casinos. There's a lot of narrative and literacy around what it takes to move up from entry level positions like line cooks and sous chefs and so on and so forth. So I think what I was going to ask is what should culinary students be thinking about to set themselves up for leadership opportunities in the future? And I think you sort of addressed that with they need three
sure.
things, right? So
I think three
it's,
things, and it's the initiative that someone needs to take to actually do it because no one, I don't know, I still don't think things get handed to people. It's the ones who speak up and say, hey, I don't know much about numbers, but I know I need to be able to run a business. What do I need to do to figure it out? Type
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So a good, I think, example of that is, you get out of culinary school and maybe your first job is you're a prep cook in a restaurant, right? And
Hmm.
after about 30 days, 45 days, you've mastered your being a prep cook, but your sous chef or your executive chef's writing your prep list for you. So maybe you ask, hey, will you teach me how to write the prep list so that I can do it? And then you don't have to. So you're taking that off of your sous, off of your exec chef, right? Bringing it onto your back. So then you're writing the prep lists and your work and you're prepping. Well, then maybe you start to notice, hey, I'd like to also learn to work the line. So during the lunch rush, I can go up and bail out somebody who needs to be bailed out. So you ask, hey, can I learn to be the fry cook, to work saute, to work the grill? And you gradually learn the kitchen and you learn all the different stations. And then you start learning, saying, hey, can I learn the expo? I want to be
Hmm.
the person leading the kitchen during rush. So you still might be the prep cook, but you're coming up in the middle of the rush to expo and helping the team that way. Um, when you see your sous chef, your executive chef placing food orders, and again, after you've mastered your position, you don't want to do this day one, right? But like once you're good at what you're doing and you have a little bit of a relationship, hey, I noticed you're purchasing produce today. Will you teach me how to do that? And learn how to do it. And then ask, can I take that off your hands?
Isn't
If
that's such a wonderful comment? Isn't that what we want from our children too? And
Sure.
and that I think what you just said there, Brian, transcends our industry. I mean, whether you're an apprentice plumber or a carpenter or you're a new lawyer in a firm, sure, you want to learn as much as you possibly can. I absolutely love the relevance of that comment.
Well,
Let's talk. Oh, go
I
ahead.
was
Go
just
ahead.
going to make a comment. So sous chefs tend to jump around every year or so. They want to go work for a new executive chef to learn, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So when your sous chef leaves, they can either bring you with them because they really like you and your energy and your willingness to learn. And maybe they're being promoted, getting their own exec chef role, and they want to bring you as their sous chef. Um, or the executive chef's going to need someone to fill that sous role. And they're going to be
Mhm.
looking for that person who wants to learn and do everything, but also who's the leader, right? One of the beauties of Learning Expo is you're leading the team, and a sous chef is a leader, not
That's
just a leader who cooks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a perfect segue to talking about job hopping and versus career stability, right? So I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, there was a time, I mean, even in the circles of the American Culinary Federation, if you didn't work in one specific position for at least a year, 12 months, it wasn't recognized on the resume. It's like, don't even put it on your resume, right? I think that's changed, right? Your example of having a great gig in the mountains of New Hampshire for a ski season, there's a lot of value there, right?
Right.
Of course I want to see that on your resume, whether it was 45 days or, 95 days. But what's your take on job hopping early on? It's a very European approach. I'll give you an example. I don't know that it's necessarily job hopping, but in order for my father to become a what they called a Meister in Germany, he had to do what was called a journeymanship for 6 years and an apprenticeship for 3. But during the journeymanship, he was passed along from one property to the next by the owner, right? By the chef, by the baker, whoever it was. But it was a path that he had to earn certain hours. So it was important for him to see a lot of things, different things. But the apprenticeship was in one area, right? One place. But I'm just curious what you gentlemen think about, the idea of job hopping early on. Does it open doors? Does it demonstrate a building of experience, or does stability in a kitchen, in one kitchen, become more important as you grow in your career down the road?
So I can tell you from my perspective, it's based on what my client tells me they want. So I
Hmm.
have clients that want job stability And that's what's really important to them. And they consider job stability today is no more than 3 jobs in 6 years, believe it or not.
Okay. Okay.
That at least that's what clients tell me. So it used to be no more than 2 jobs in 5 years, but
Okay.
they don't even want to see the candidate. But
Huh.
I think when you're young in your career and you're learning, I think the key isn't stability as much as, are you always learning? Are you always coming in and getting something new today? So if the learning stops wherever you are, then it's time to move on, right? Until you're ready to get into a leadership role. Once you're a leader, it changes a little bit. So, if you're a sous chef, again, the expectation is you're going to stay a sous somewhere for at least a year.
Yeah.
To me,
Yeah.
if I see
Evan,
if I see someone with sous chef positions, 2 every year, that's a red flag to me. There's someone that maybe people don't want to work with or for.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Evan, what about loyalty? Where's loyalty come in? What do your clients tell you about that?
I think it's interesting what Brian said about it just depends on what my clients want. And I think that's an important reason to, number one, to partner with us from the client perspective, because that is what we do. And everybody wants different things.
Hmm.
Um, and I think listening to what our clients want is big. Being a professional recruiter, much like Brian, I think gaining experience and gaining value if in a young person's career to start is everything. If you go somewhere and you're there for 3 months and then the next place is 6 months and then the next place is four, that could put up a red flag, no question about it. But if a recruiter digs in and asks, okay, well, why were you here for 3 months? Hey, that was a contract gig. I was the saucier there for 3 months. And the owner liked me so much, he moved me over to the next place. And then I learned how to do the grill. So I think the experiences that you get, whether you're staging, doing an apprenticeship, or doing something else early on, I think that can really set you up. I can tell you that if I see a resume of someone who has 7 years of experience and one candidate was there for 7 years at one job and the other was at four, guess where I'm going?
That's
I'm
where you're
going.
going.
I'm
Yeah.
going with the one who's had a diverse experience at three different types of places. Um, and that's something that makes Brian and I unique within Gecko Hospitality is that he recruits a different space than I do, but yet we share the most candidates of any operation in the whole company. And there's a reason for that because our clients want that diversified talent. Someone who's worked in a restaurant, private club, and for Aramark, probably going to be pretty good. They probably experience a lot of different things, and that makes them unique. We come back to
Hmm.
that word again, right? What's going to set you apart from everybody else? I think that's what really resounds with me there.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I also want to touch a little bit on a topic that's increasingly becoming more and more important in today's market. Um, our kitchens are diverse. There's a number of individuals that are Spanish speaking. I'm wondering what role does being fluent in both English and Spanish play in career development, and how does it help cooks and chefs in leadership positions to be able to better work with diverse teams?
well, I think being bilingual, trilingual is extremely important.
Hmm.
I would say if there's one language you should know as a chef or a cook or anyone in a kitchen, it's Spanish.
Hmm.
I know the majority of the restaurants, at least in cities, I would say, um, are Spanish speaking kitchens. And you know, that doesn't mean they only speak Spanish, but when they're talking to each other, they're speaking in Spanish. And as the leader, you should understand and be able to understand everything they're saying.
Hmm.
And then be able to, speak to them in their first language, especially during the rush when, you're trying to move things along. The less they have to think about other than their actual job, the better.
Good advice. Good advice. Um, Another topic with with a lot of people competing for similar roles, what do you look for and in an individual being able to differentiate themselves. What's the advice on building a food portfolio, um, social media presence? How do students to graduates today sort of showcase themselves, there's the
Mhm.
unique word again, their unique talents, so that they make a lasting impression on Brian and Evan, on Gecko, and the clients you serve? This is probably the most important question
It's
that
a
we're
it's
asking
a
today.
it's a great question. On our team right now, we're actually recruiting 4 executive chef positions. We get all walks of life that are applying for this role. People who are in the early stages of their career, people are in the mid, people are in the twilight. Um, and I think setting yourself apart and being real with yourself, if you're just going to send pictures of all the desserts you've done for an executive chef role, you're probably going to want to see some entrees and some appetizers and some other things. So diversifying what you put out there, obviously not taking them from other places, which we see sometimes, which still boggles
Mhm.
my mind,
Mhm.
but it's one where you want to put your best foot forward and make sure you are taking pictures of the items that you're doing and showcasing how you can do it. I mean, it's so powerful to be able to do this from a social media perspective or a visual perspective or a video perspective, to be able to see what you can do is everything, because at the end of the day, you have this piece of paper that's a resume. If you're looking at that versus someone who's going to show you, hey, this is my LinkedIn page, this is my Instagram feed, this is my food portfolio. The more you can showcase yourself from print, the better. And I think it's important to do. I've had people ask why, and they don't get an interview. And then I have other people who say, here you go, here you go, here you go. We're getting through the door quite quick. People get impressed. I mean, we're all big dumb animals at the end of the day, right? We want to see pictures, we want to see
Mhm.
video. It works. There's a reason it does. And to diversify yourself with being real about the best work you can put out there, you should do it.
We eat with our eyes, yeah, just like a good
Absolutely.
menu, and 100%.
And I would also just add to that, be willing to jump backwards sometimes. So maybe you get your first sous role or even an exec chef role, and be willing to go work at French Laundry as a prep cook for 6 months, right? Or any two, three, or even one Michelin star restaurant. To have that on your resume, when someone's looking for, like, especially an executive chef who can be creative, that
Mhm.
that's huge.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because those are the conversations we have a lot with our students, right? Go try to go work for Bobby, right? Just try,
Yeah.
and they've worked so well with us to try to make some of those dreams come true. What are some Gecko insider tips on really crushing an interview?
I think the way that someone can crush an interview is to obviously be confident and be forthright with your answers. The thing that I was thinking about while the both of you were talking is these experiences, right? That we all have in life, in culinary, in food, and recruit, and everything. Share those experiences, share those stories. No one wants to hear I'm a natural born leader. I'm very organ. No one wants to hear that stuff. I want to hear about your experiences. I want to hear about the nightmare that you had on Valentine's Day when there was 100 tickets coming out of the window. How did you dig yourself out of it? Like, I want to hear those types of things from culinary candidates. I want to hear how you figured out how to make stock from an executive chef who'd been around for 50 years and then you finally got it right when you met him. Those are the things that we want to hear. Or at least those are the things that our clients want to hear. Is we come back to that uniqueness and that those things that make you stand out. Um, I think that's the way that you can crush an interview without getting ahead of your skis, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you don't want
yeah.
to throw too much out there, but I think being as professionally honest and real as you can in an interview will get you to the next stage and probably land you the gig that you've always wanted to get. And being real with yourself and saying not getting ahead of your skis. If you've been an executive chef in a hotel that has 30 rooms and now you're going to apply to a role that has 1,000, might not be
Yeah.
the best, but just like Brian said, maybe you're willing to take a step back to go ahead. I think that is what sets people apart and something that I honestly look for. I mean, I do at least 5 interviews a day. Um, I want to hear different things from different people, and I'd imagine you do too. As guests on this show, you probably want to hear some unique things.
Yeah, I'm not I love the answer. I'm not 100% sure I was anticipating that answer, but that's really comforting to hear the experiences, the sharing of the experiences, the stories. Let me ask another question.
Can I just answer that
Yeah,
one
yeah,
as well
yeah,
before you move on,
yeah,
Seth?
yeah, please,
So,
yeah.
I think it's important, first of all, to know who you're interviewing with. So look them up on LinkedIn. Study their background, right? If you're interviewing at, a certain restaurant or hotel, know where you're interviewing and know the history of that property, who the owners are, who were the last executive chefs that worked there, and what was their background. And again, you can go on LinkedIn and find, just put in the name of the property, and all the people who worked in that property are going to pop up,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's out there. But then when you go to the interview, first of all, listen to the questions being asked and answer that question. So one of the things Evan mentioned was, tell stories, and he's totally right. But there are people who don't answer the question. And then there's also some people
Very
who go
true.
on and on and on and can't stop talking. So the 30 questions they have to ask you, they don't have time to ask you those questions.
That's
So
such a
you don't get
you
to know.
guys are clearly a team.
And
I'm
then
so glad
yeah,
you jumped in there because I was going to ask that. How do you control, how does the hiring party control the narrative? Because to your
right.
point, what if the person who wants the job just goes down a path that takes you nowhere?
I mean, I'll tell people sometimes, look, you just talk too much. At the end of
Well,
the day, like
you're
like
coaching them,
just
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
stop.
yeah. Stop.
Like I asked you a question, and for 20 minutes you've been giving me your life story. Like
No,
answer the question, right?
It
If you
answer
go
the
in
happens.
an
question.
interview, if it takes 20 minutes to tell me, something, you're not getting the job. No matter how qualified you
Such
are,
good
you're not getting the job.
advice.
But then
Such good
also
advice.
make sure you have questions to ask in an interview, because they'll ask you at the end of an interview, do you have any questions for me? And that's a way that they're judging that you're really interested in the job,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because everyone wants to be wanted, right? So they want you to want them. Just because you're sitting there doesn't mean you want to work there.
Go ahead, Evan. I
I,
and then I've got a follow up.
sorry to make it long. What he is saying, what Brian is saying is if I don't have someone that tells me that they want the job, I won't present them to the role. And you want someone to sit across from you we talked about closing an interview at one point. And if you don't close the interview, chances are you're not getting a call back. The last question should always be, are there any questions that would prevent me from getting this job offer from you because I really want it? Who's not going to offer that person the job?
Wow.
If
Wow.
they've
Okay.
hit that interview and they've crushed it and they've gotten through and they've answered the questions and paid attention and then they get to the end and they close it, I give that advice to every candidate I speak to. Before you go in there and when you're done and you start closing up, just ask the person, say, hey, I really want this job. Is there any other questions that you can ask that I haven't answered already? And I think that just resonates with people. People want to know that you want the job.
Yeah.
I think it's that simple because there's plenty of people who just go in and answer the questions and just want to get through it and get to the next interview.
Mhm.
If you do
That,
that, you're just going to keep
can I just say the
succeeding.
chills that I'm hearing um, are real. One question that I ask in any interview, if I'm interviewing, for a role at the school for years, you go through the interview, you get to know the people, you listen to the stories, you validate stuff that's on the resume, all of this. But then I always ask, um, what are you looking for from us? What can we do? And the immediate response, 99% of the time, is, wow, that's a really good question, meaning they don't know. They hadn't thought about it, right? So they probably did better in their next interview, but they hadn't thought about what they were looking for. So I really, really love that. That's a whole nother episode. Noel is going to have to set that up. Brian, I'd be remiss if I didn't, give you the floor to talk a little bit about Memory Cafe. It was really, I kind of looked it up, but I was really touched by, our research and the work that you're doing. Can you share just a little bit if you feel comfortable doing that?
So for the last 15 years, I've been a member of Rotary
Yeah,
International.
sure,
And
sure.
one of the great things about Rotary clubs is, just being able to give back to the community and to the world and doing some really good work around the world. There's a huge foundation, so there's lots of money available. And when I was in North Carolina, I was involved with a Rotary Club where it was the 50th anniversary of Rotary. I was the president of my club that year. I was involved in the whole project of making that happen. And, for me, I was trying to create, actually at the time, a project that the 5 clubs in our town could work on together in perpetuity.
Hmm.
And being from the hospitality industry, I'd heard of memory cafes and I went to one and I thought, oh, this is something great we could do. So, once a month, and it's been, with the exception of COVID, it's been going on for about 10 years now. Um, what we would do is we would provide dinner, entertainment of some kind. The Elvis impersonators are always big hits with people with Alzheimer's because they
Yeah,
tend to think
that's
it's really Elvis.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then, sometimes dancing, but then for the caregivers, the wife or the children, it's an opportunity for them to get together with other caregivers and share experiences. And that's kind of what the Memory Cafe was all about and is all about.
No, that's
Um,
that's that's so beautiful. Thank you for doing that, and thank you
yeah,
for sharing that with our listeners. Well, before I let you, this has been really, really fun.
Yeah.
I was a little intimidated 2-on-1, and you guys handled me very, very carefully. I appreciate that. But the toughest question is still to come. The name of the podcast is The Ultimate Dish. So, in your mind, we'll go to Evan first. What is the ultimate dish? Could be a memory or an actual meal. Um, could be several courses. Your call.
Oh boy. That's like asking a chef, what's your favorite dish to cook? And they're going to look at you with the same response.
Right?
Um, I mean, I worked in an Asian American restaurant for about 11 years. So I have a deep affection for Asian cuisine,
Mm-hmm.
Japanese and sushi especially. I don't know if I mean, yellowtail collared dishes are probably my favorite when we get into that. Most people won't order that, but I certainly do and was taught that way. Um, or any braised short rib dish is gonna really
yeah.
bring me in.
I'm there. I'm there.
That's
Yeah.
typically a route I would navigate to, especially, where I reside. You get a elk fillet, I won't turn it down. Um, those are probably that's where my mind goes. That's probably another podcast that I could talk about for hours. Um,
That's I'll bring one of my son-in-laws on. He's an avid fisherman and hunter, so he'll
yeah,
talk to us about elk and uh and tuna as well. So
sounds great. Tough question. That's a really tough
it
one.
is a
One
it
that
is
I'm sure could really open things up for you.
sometimes I go down the path. Most of the folks that come on the show, the majority are chefs working in the industry, but I've had rugby champions and comedians and different people like that. And it's so funny with chefs though, music always kind of finds its way into the conversation and or motorcycles.
Yeah.
So it's music, motorcycles, and the ultimate dish. And music for you too, Evan?
Music's extremely important to me. I've seen thousands of concerts. You probably won't get that response from everyone.
No,
I've
no.
toured the country seeing music, and I still see quite a bit.
And
Um,
I didn't even know that about you. Top three bands of all time. Go.
Top three bands of all time: Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, and Pink Floyd.
I'll go. I'll
Wow.
go.
I wouldn't have chosen any of them.
I love it. I love it. It just he's mirroring me right there. Brian, ultimate dish. What is it?
So I'm a meat guy. I have a smoker and I smoke a lot of meat.
Okay.
I studied French cuisine, Italian cuisine, but I think my favorite dish, and I was thinking about this when you asked the question, it goes back to when I was 12 years old. And I had, for the first time, I had beef Wellington at the Rainbow Room in Rockefeller Center.
Awesome.
And it was my grandparents' anniversary
Oh,
dinner, and it
oh.
was awesome. And I went home and I said to my mom, I want to learn to make that. And I taught myself how to make it at 12 years old. And
Wow.
so, and I make beef Wellington. So, like Thanksgiving, I make,
Mhm.
I make turkey, but I'll make beef Wellington. But then I thought, well, what else can I do that's Wellington? So I make salmon Wellington, which my kids are like, oh, that's better than beef Wellington.
Yeah, yeah.
Turkey Wellington, it's all different, but it's all the same idea of in a puff pastry. But
Do
but
you
I
do
do
the
like.
salmon? Do you do the salmon Wellington with julienne vegetables underneath it, or rice, or what do you put under it?
So what I do is I make almost like a cream spinach that goes with the salmon
Oh, okay,
inside
nice.
the
Yeah,
pastry dough.
yeah,
I'll either do a hollandaise or a beurre blanc as a sauce, and then
yeah.
so then julienne vegetables as well.
Very
And
nice. Very nice.
it's lovely.
Are you a
So
music guy? Motorcycle?
well, I don't have a motorcycle. My mom worked in hospitals and was like, "You're
Okay.
never riding a motorcycle,"
Fair
because
enough. Fair
she'd
enough.
see them
Fair
all
enough.
dead on the side of the road. But I have a good motorcycle joke.
Oh.
Um,
Is it clean?
oh, it's clean. It's clean. So,
Okay.
actually, I was watching a video. So, a wife says to her husband, now that we have a child, it's time, I think, for you to sell your motorcycle, and to mature a little bit. And he says, you sound like my ex-wife. And she said, you were married before? And he said, no.
You sound like my next ex-wife. Yeah.
So, my favorite band of all time are the Eagles. Love the
Oh,
Eagles.
good
I
call.
think
Good
the
call.
growth of the band through the years was amazing. I love Fleetwood Mac. Was
Yep.
another
Yep.
one. Um, I think British rock. I love the Kinks growing up. It was one of the first concerts I saw as a kid. That along with Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath and
Oh
you
my
know.
gosh. Oh my gosh.
But no, I think the Eagles were my favorite band of all time.
That's a great
Um,
call. And great dishes, great calls on the bands. I've got a 650 GS BMW sitting in my garage, literally
nice,
sitting in my garage, and my podium is U2, Fleetwood Mac, and Bob Seger in that order.
nice. Bob Seger's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. I'm not a Detroit fan, but he's the king of Detroit. Let me tell you. I saw Ozzy Osbourne in 1980. Um, it was mind altering back then.
It was awesome.
Great.
Hey, have you, Evan, being in the Denver area, have you ever been to Sunday Vinyl, Bobby's place there by the train station?
I have
It's right
not.
next to Tavernetta. So yeah, he's a big music guy and he plays a different album. His wife selects the album every night, and that's what they spin,
What's it
during
called?
service. Sunday Vinyl.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
You got to pop in there. It's right across, the walkway of Tavernetta, which is right at the train
Okay.
station. Yeah.
I'll have
No,
to
it's
check it
just
out.
spectacular. Yeah, yeah, really, really great.
Thank you for that.
Gentlemen, so appreciate. I'm going to see you guys next week
Yep.
in
Awesome.
Orlando. I'm super super excited for that, and I'm going to call Rob in a little bit and tell him that you both behaved.
Yeah.
And thank you. Much more continued success. Thanks for everything that you do for our students. So great to be partners, part of the same company, different verticals. Really, really enjoyed our chat today.
Yeah, me as
Thanks,
well.
Scott.
Thank you, Kirk. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely.
All
Absolutely.
right.
Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast to find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. And if you can, please leave us a rating on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to support our show. This helps us reach more aspiring individuals ready to take the next step toward their dream careers. Thanks for listening.